All right, so about a year ago, I put out a video on a mock portfolio or a top 20 stocks portfolio. So I wanted to go through it, see which ones I still like, which ones I don't like. I'm not necessarily going to say which ones I would swap it out for. I'm just going to kind of give my thoughts on every single one in here and go from there. So the first one, again, they're in alphabetical order, so no particular order. AGM, Federal Agriculture Management. I do like this stock, although I believe it's in the 170s or 180s right now. Back at the time, it was 138. So if I could get it for, I'm just going off the top of my head, I wouldn't hold me to it here, below 150, maybe 160, I would look to pick more up. Is it in my top 20 right now? No, but it's mainly because of the price. ARE, which is a REIT, this one I definitely would swap out, mainly because I think that the higher for longer narrative is going to hurt REITs, at least to some degree. The next one, ATD, Alimentation Couche-Tard. This one I definitely would keep. It's now around $76, $77 a share, so it's up probably 15% roughly. Since then, I definitely would be keeping it. That one I really, really do like. That's a for sure keep. American Express. This one I probably would not have, although that's mainly due to the fact that I believe the shares are around like 220, 230 right now, which is up significantly from the 165 it was a year ago. If you could get it for that price again, I definitely would have it, but right now it's too expensive. CN, this is another one that if it was for the right price, absolutely I would have it in there. Right now I probably wouldn't, because I believe this one's up around 150, in the 150s, I believe, just off the top of my head. So that one I probably would not have if I were to make a video today, but that's mainly because of the price. That's another one that if I can get it for a good price, I'm definitely all over it. The next one is Capital Power. This one is actually down like probably 15% roughly from over the last year. This is one I definitely would not have in there, mainly because, again, higher rate environment. When you look at utilities are to a large degree bond proxies, meaning you're buying them mainly for the dividend. And when you can get a higher dividend solely, or not a dividend, but a higher rate simply by buying bonds, well, all of a sudden utilities aren't quite as attractive. The next one here is EQ Bank. I still really like EQ Bank. It's around, I believe, $88 a share, roughly $66. That's probably like a 25% increase, which is extremely good, especially for a bank. Definitely would still have it in there. The next one is EQIX. This is another REIT. This one is up in the 800s right now, I believe. Another one that I definitely would have if I could get it for the right price. I think it's definitely expensive where it's at right now, so that's kind of why I probably wouldn't have it if I were to do it today, but I definitely would do it if it was the right price. Extra Space Storage, again, a similar story here. It is, I think, a tiny bit higher today than it was a year ago, but I would want to get the. I would probably wait till like in the 120s. I would be looking to pick up EXR. If it got in there based on current valuation, that's when I would buy it. But I don't know if that happens, especially in an environment where rates are probably going to be trending down rather than up, although they are going to be higher than they were, 3-4 years ago. IIPR, again, another similar story here. This one is around, I think it's like 105, 106 roughly. So that's up 30%, 35% in the last year. This was one where I bought this a decent sized position. Probably at the time it was 4 or 5% roughly, and that is now probably 8 or 9% of my personal portfolio. So that was a steal of a deal if you bought IIPR back then, because back then it was yielding around 10%. Now it's, I think, about 6.5, 7. If you could, but I think that, again, that is an absolute steal. So congrats to anyone else who bought it back in the 60s, because I know I did. Kroger is one I definitely would be swapping out here. The growth just isn't there, and not to mention too, it's kind of I think it has like a 2.5% dividend, so you're not buying it for the dividend, but that's very important. And I think that the growth probably will be a little bit challenged, for lack of a better way of putting it. The next one is Microchip Technology. This one depends on the price. Right now, I believe it's in the low 90s. Back then, it was 77. If I could get it in the 70s, I probably would be adding it. But in the 90s, in the 80s, to me, it's the price isn't there. If I could go back and get it in the 70s back then, I would be buying it all day and all night. The next one is ODFL. This one has split since this happened, so it did a 2-for-1 split. So based on split adjusted pricing, it would be around 160 back then. I believe it's currently in the 170s, so it's up slightly. But I still think I still think ODFL is a very underrated company, and I'm actually currently dollar cost averaging this company, so I still definitely would have it on the list. Universal Display, OLED. This is one that I bought it here. It was in the it was 147 in my personal portfolio. I believe it was in the 120s where I picked it up. So I would want to be buying it below 140, maybe even 130 for it to be a good price. Right now, I believe it's around 200. So again, got a very nice return out of it, but it's too expensive where it's at right now. QLYS, this is one that I bought a very small position, literally at like 110 in my personal portfolio. Now it is at about 140, although I believe it went over $200 a share at one point. I would be buying it where it's currently at. This is one I definitely still would have in there, and getting it at 127 would be an even better deal. Steel Dynamics, this is one that, again, if it's the right price, absolutely would be having it in there. Getting it at 95 was a very good deal. I believe it's like 120 something right now. So again, very good deal there. Next one, Visa. Another one where it depends on the price. It is currently in the 270s. Right here, it's at 229. If I could get it for that, I would absolutely be buying it. But I do not know if that will happen again. But so right now, Visa's kind of if you have it, you're holding it, in my opinion. If not, then you just gotta wait. Essentially, if you want to get a position. Vici is actually down. I believe they're around $29 a share now. They're at 31 back then. I'm still buying because I think that this is one of the areas that I think is going to see growth. I mean, they own like casinos and resorts type properties. That's one of those things. I mean they own MGM National Harbor, which I believe is the one of the biggest, if not the biggest, casinos outside of Vegas. And there's someone I follow that goes there quite a bit, and they say every time I go there, it's packed, like absolutely packed. So I think that, and again, that's obviously a personal anecdote, but when it comes to gambling and those kind of things, and not to mention too, like when it comes to those kind of trips, I know people like personally who said, rather than going to Mexico, I went to Vegas this winter because, the weather's not quite as good. It's still better than Canada, and it's cheaper, right? You can get direct flights from basically every major city, and even in Canada, right? Let alone the States. So I think, and not to mention too, like this is one of those things that, okay, rather than take some big major trip, you go do one of those things. Those weekend trips with the guys or the girls, like that's something that I don't. We're gonna have to have a really rough economy for that to go away, and not to mention too, when times are good, these kind of places just blow up because there's a lot of people there's a lot of people out there that are good at making money, but they're also very good at losing money. And those are the kinds of people that just love casinos and those kind of things. So I still like Vici. It's one of the handful of companies on this list that I'm currently buying. And the last one here, Waste Management. Waste Management, I believe, is currently about $200 a share roughly. Back then it was at $163. This is one of those companies that it gets cheap enough to buy probably like every 5 years. And when that happens, I think you definitely need to be taking a position, because this is one of the safest companies in the market. Again, not that it's truly quote unquote safe, but as far as stocks go, it is one of the safest stocks you can buy. And on top of that, it's not cyclical. And on top of that, I believe it outperforms the S&P, or has outperformed the S&P, at least over the long run. So Waste Management, I think, is an absolute must own or absolute must have on a watch list, because it's a solid company that is not cyclical, so it's not going to get hit hard in a recession. Now, the one big problem with that is that it trades at a premium. I mean, it has like a 30, 35 price to free cash flow, which is pretty crazy expensive. But so again, you're paying a premium for that stability and for that growth. So it's one that you keep on a watch list. If it gets to a reasonable valuation, you buy it. If it doesn't, it stays on the watch list. If you own it, you're holding it. So anyway, that is my thoughts on the companies. Looking back on it, honestly, it's kind of hard to know for sure, like down the road. Looking back on it, I probably should have made some slightly different decisions. But I mean, at this time, the projections were a little bit different, right? And I mean, honestly, I don't think there's any company on here that I would be, if I owned it, I would be dying to get out of it. There isn't a company on here that I can say that for. So nothing major has changed. The main thing that's changed is I think that there's just better opportunities. So anyway, if you liked the video, please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and stay tuned for more.